Today we'll be taking off from KRDD, which is the Reading Municipal Airport. We'll be flying up to KLMT, which is the Klamath Falls, Oregon Municipal Airport. On our way, we'll fly over Shasta Lake, and we will fly past Mount Shasta. We're in general aviation parking space number 72 at Reading, and the first thing I want to do is to make our skies a little more dramatic. So what I'm going to do is to change the time of day. I'm going to change the type of clouds from broken to scattered clouds, and we're going to get rid of some layers of wind, and we're going to raise the base of the clouds above our cruising altitude. We have some clouds that are pretty low. They're below our 9,000 foot cruising altitude, so what I'm going to do is to take the base of those clouds and raise them up to about 10,000 feet, where they will not be any clouds in our actual flight path. And I can change the coverage of the clouds, the density of the clouds, and the scatter of the clouds to my liking, which is a pretty nice trick. Well, that pretty much takes care of the weather situation. Now we'll see if we can bring this Honda Jet to life from a cold, dark condition. The first thing I like to do is to get rid of both the pilot and co-pilot flight yokes. And then we're going to turn on the battery power here. And to keep from draining the battery, we're going to hook up the ground power unit. Once you turn on the battery, all of the electronics come to life. It's pretty daunting. We'll just sort of get everything set up like we like it for the displays. And now it's time to enter our flight plan. We're going to start by adding our origin airport, which is KRDD. And we'll need to select our runway for that. And that's going to be runway 34. Next, we'll add our first en route waypoint, which will be Cindu, C-I-N-D-U. And if you misspell it like I did, you get to re-enter it. There we go. Now that's going to be at 9,000 foot elevation when we get to Cindu. So, no, not 90,000, 9,000. There we go. And that will also happen to be our cruising altitude. So I'll go ahead now and enter the next 3 waypoints, which will all be at our cruising altitude of 9,000 feet. And now it's time to add our destination airport, which is KLMT. We'll type that in here. And rather than just enter a runway, we're going to enter a procedure. And instead of specifying a runway, which is ILS 32 in case you missed it, we're going to be specifying an approach for ILS 32, and we just put in our minimum visibility for landing. If you notice, it popped in another waypoint for us called MASMA. MZAMA. That happens to be what we call the final approach fix. We're going to need to be at 6,300 feet elevation, not 9,000 feet, in order to intercept the glide slope. Everything on our landing will be automated on the instrument landing system. The instrument landing system that we will intercept at Mazama will give us both lateral and vertical guidance right down to the runway automatically. The next thing we need to do is to get the speed we need on the runway in order to take off. It's called rotate. It's the V rotate speed. And we just had it put those speeds up next to this little tape right here, which is our speed. It's like a speedometer. If you look at that compass looking thing in the middle of the screen, it just changed from, the line just changed from green to purple. What I did was I changed the navigation method we're going to use from a localizer to actually GPS. Now I'm going to preset our altitude to 9,000 feet, which is the cruise altitude we want. And that will show up on the altitude tape on the right hand side of the display. The aircraft will automatically climb until it reaches that altitude, then it will level off and stay there until it's told to do otherwise. So there we are, set to climb to 9,000 feet. Important thing you have to remember, the instrument landing system at KLMT is set to operate on a certain frequency, and you better have your navigation radio set to that frequency, otherwise you're going to have a really bad landing. This one happens to be set to 109.5. And a lot of times when you pick your approach, Some aircraft are automatically capable of setting the frequency for you because they know what it is at the different airports. So here we're going to be good to go. Well, it's time to get these two engines fired up and get everything else done that we need to get done before we take to the skies. And then we'll be taking off pretty soon. And that's Shasta Lake coming right up in front of us. Well, we've reached our 9,000 foot cruise altitude, and we'll stay right here until we get to, let's try Zumi, at which point we're going to be descending to 6,300 feet to Mazama, which is where we will pick up our final approach fix for our automated landing into KLMT. Don't know how good you can see it, but off to the left side of the aircraft, way off in the distance, that is Mount Shasta. Most general aviation aircraft do not have an auto throttle. The Honda Jet does, and one of the modes is that it will follow the FAA's regulations regarding speeds at different altitudes. So it will control your throttle to make sure you're compliant with FAA rules. It also has a manual mode where you can control the speed. You set it for a speed and it will go at that speed. This is very handy for landings. And I'm switching to that mode right now. And there's a pretty nice look at Mount Shasta off the left side of the aircraft. We're on our way to Zumi at our 9,000 foot cruising altitude, and from there we need to descend to Mazama down to 6,300 feet. If we're very far off of that, we'll miss the ILS signal and we will not get our glide slope down to the runway. Right now I'm using the manual speed control on the auto throttle to turn us down our speed down a couple of 100 miles an hour. I will eventually turn off the auto throttle and fly it down manually. Our approach speed is actually 110 miles per hour. The black area at the top of the screen is the word VPath, and what that means is the vertical navigation system has a change in altitude coming up, and for us it'll be from our cruising altitude of 9,000 down to 6,300 feet. On this screen, it will tell us what our landing and approach speed should be based upon our aircraft weight and our glide slope. In this case, we're going to be approaching at 110 miles an hour and landing at 105. The purple line in the center of that compass means that we're still using GPS to travel, and we have just begun our descent down to Maizama. Now we have a green line in the compass. That means that we have picked up the localizer, and pretty soon we'll be on the glide slope. We'll pick up the glide slope down to the runway. Okay, we've just now captured the glide slope. This will guide us vertically down to the end of the runway. Hopefully it'll be the correct end of the runway. And we are being guided laterally by the localizer. And if you look straight ahead of the aircraft off in the distance, you'll be able to spot the runway.
Autopilot.
Welcome to the Crater Lake Klamath Falls Regional Airport. We'll get this thing parked in just a few minutes, and then we're going to take the drone up in the air and we'll give you a nice aerial view of 360 degrees around the airport. Well, thank you for joining the Bad Old Buzzard on this flight from Redding, California to Klamath Falls, Oregon. And I'd like to thank you also for not throwing up on my airplane. This flight actually only took 29 minutes and 14 seconds.